Welcome to Living Legacies. I'm Tom Morrow, your host. Today we're talking with Ed Parish of Oceanside. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom.
You were born in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yes, sir.
At 1939.
Yeah.
That was a good year.
Yeah. A lot of things happened.
You were the eldest of 5 boys?
Yes.
Tell me about growing up with 5 boys.
Well, that was kind of interesting. I can remember one time at the table with all boys, when one of us wanted a potato. He just threw it all the way down to the other end. And I thought my dad would kill us, but we were on a limited budget, so we enjoyed eating all the food at the table every day, and it was kind of amazing. It really was. Boys, I'm sure, are a lot different than girls. We didn't have a girl in the family, so we were, rough and rowdy. One thing my dad would do in those days, if one of the boys was in a fight at school, it was beat up, he'd send the next boy in line, oldest boy, out to take care of the situation. Being the eldest, you can imagine how often I got involved in the fray. So
What did Dad do?
He was a career military man. He spent time in both World War II and Korea. At one time, he was even MacArthur's aide in World War II.
So he's in the Army.
Yes, he was an Army man, and he retired. I think I'm trying to recall. I guess about 1957 or 58, somewhere in there, he retired.
Where were some of the duty stations that
Well,
he took you right along with him?
Yeah, probably one of the most fascinating ones in the United States here was at Fort Riley, Kansas, where he was regimental commander. And I remember one time, I guess I was about 15, and the division has 3 regiments in it of 5,000 troops. I was watching my dad march in front of 5,000 men. You have no idea what 5,000 men look like marching in one big block. I don't think they ever have that many on a studio set.
No.
But in real terms, it's an amazing experience. I absolutely remember that vividly. And of course, that was one of many parades they used to have in those days.
Sure. Yeah, that would be 5,000 men. Is that a regiment?
Yes. One of the other things that happened to my dad during that period, he was one of 12 men that sat in a trench at the nuclear bomb experiments in Nevada, and eventually all 12 of those men died of cancer. He died at age 51.
Now, was that
from radiation exposure?
That was the tests after the war?
I was about 19, I'm going to say 52, 53, in there somewhere. I'm not sure the exact year.
Did your dad die from the tests? Or?
Yes.
He did. He was only 51?
When he died,
Yeah.
And it's my understanding all 12 men eventually died of cancer.
Well,
from nuclear radiation.
An interesting part of your life was yet to come, though. The family moved to Germany?
That's correct. Eventually we were transferred to Germany. That would be about 1955, all 5 of us. It's kind of interesting. We left en route in an old 1949 Lincoln with 22, I remember the number vividly, 22 bags on top, because I had to strap them all down. And we finally get to New York, and they loaded the car and everything up on a ship to get to Germany, but we flew. Now, in those days, it wasn't nonstop. We left New York, went to Greenland, and then from Greenland to Ireland, Shannon, Ireland, and then from there to Frankfurt, Germany. So it was quite an ordeal by air.
I can imagine.
And we finally get there and spent 3 years in Germany.
Now, what was Germany like in those days?
Well, it was the first year, actually our 10-year occupation had just ended, and it was their first year of having their independence. You drove around, you still saw a number of bombed out areas, and still the debris left from the bombings. one of the fascinating things was Newburg, where we lived the first year I lived, and the wall was partially rebuilt, partially bombed out, but Newburg was a very fascinating city. Today it's all been rebuilt. I haven't been back in years. But
a very old city.
Very, very old. It goes back
with a lot of history. Goes back to the 11th and 12th century.
Yeah, one of the things we could do in those days, I don't think you can do it today, we could visit the dungeons, the Newburg dungeons, under the castle. And I'll tell you, you sure don't want to be a member, a guest of that dungeon, because it was gruesome, very, very gruesome, the equipment we looked at, the torture they could put a human through.
Well, that's where they had the great Nazi rallies back in 1933 and I think 35.
Absolutely. I went to an American high school there called Newburg American High School. And it was started, I believe, in '49. A couple of years ago, it ceased to exist. They just tore it down. They didn't have a need for it anymore. But we still have something called the Newburg Alumni. So all of us who graduated from that are all over the world, and we still participate in an online rally, and every few years we have an alumni meeting, which I have never gone to, but it's kind of interesting. But coming back to your question, Tom, where Hitler had his rallies, we used to, in that same field, that's where our high school would participate with its track meets and things like that. So that was kind of an interesting experience.
Well, those days, I don't want to say that you were a bit ornery, but you were very adventuresome.
Yeah, I sure was.
Well, tell me about some of those experiences. You stowed away. Well, first of all, you attended the World's Fair in Brussels.
That's correct.
What was that like?
That was fascinating. You know, that was the beginning. You know, we were talking about atoms and things like that, and the main centerpiece for that World's Fair was like an atom. And if you recall,
that was an icon for Belgium for years.
It absolutely was, and it was fascinating. We went up there. We camped out on the way. My dad took us, and I believe that was 1955. I'm not 100% sure of that year, but I believe that's when the World's Fair was. And it was really, really fascinating. It was the first time I'd ever experienced anything like that. And so we went from there. And
tell me about stowing away on an
airplane?
On an Air Force plane.
Yeah, I was, I guess, about 16, maybe 16 or 17. And I got on my moped, that's a motorized bicycle, and went down to a military base. Now, keep in mind, I did have a military ID card, so I could freely go in and out of these bases. And I just parked my motorcycle, chained it up, and my moped rather, got on a military airplane, and was hoping to go to Italy. Well, I wound up, they found me when I went to use the restroom on the plane en route to a secret base in France. I have no idea where it landed. When they landed, they expected they were going to arrest me, the MPs were. And, you know, I was hungry. They gave me a meal and kind of felt sorry for me and put me on a plane leaving that base to Manchester, England. So I wound up in Manchester, England. I hitchhiked my way down from Manchester down to London, spent a couple of nights with English families that just took me in. It was kind of interesting how gracious people were. I wound up spending the 4th of July, which I think would be 1956, at a military base, and then I was able to get a flight back on a military aircraft back to Germany.
Where were your folks all this time?
Well, I just sent my dad a telegram, safe in UK, love Ed. And I thought he was going to kill me when he finally came up with me.
I mean, did you just decide one day I want to go to Italy?
Yes. And
didn't tell anybody?
No, just went. But, you know, we were kind of loosey-goosey in those days and did our thing. So.
I can imagine what my folks would have said if I had done something like that.
Yeah. Well, prior to then, I'd had a couple of experiences where I got on a motorcycle and I went to Brussels, Belgium. I was picked up for vagrancy because I was very poor. I never had any money. But my motorcycle had a German license plate on it because it belonged to a German friend of mine. And I had a little problem in that I lost my passport. So there I am with a German motorcycle, a motorcycle with a German license plate on it. No passport. I did have my military ID card. And so they picked me up for vagrancy because I don't know how much money I was supposed to have on my body, but whatever it wasn't adequate. So they put me in overnight until a commissar who spoke English the next day could talk to me.
Now, where was this? In Belgium?
Brussels, Belgium.
Uh-huh.
But I have to tell you, that was really scary in that place because there was a whole, what the cots were basically a piece of foam rubber, say 3 by 6, 7 or 7 feet, and all the derelicts laying on there from all spoke different languages, and I never slept all night. I was petrified that something would happen to me. Nothing did.
You were about 17?
About 17, 16, 17.
Well, did you spend a night in jail in Nancy, France?
Yeah, I did that too.
Well, how did that happen?
Well, that happened because coming back to our 1949 Lincoln, we had a bearing burnout in it, and so
finding parts for Lincoln in the middle of Europe is
very
not the
difficult.
easiest.
I had to go back to the military base in Newburg, get the bearing, and then have it put in the vehicle and then drive it back to pick up my parents, and they were near Paris visiting friends. But what happened was, in those days, that was during de Gaulle period, I had the whole trunk full of 2-gallon gas cans, and I stopped and helped a Frenchman in Nancy, France out. But one of the police commissars saw me giving this gas to a Frenchman, which was illegal. I didn't know it. So they put me in jail over the night till the next day I could have someone to come and bail me out. So, and I remember it was with some Algerians. Oh, I was petrified. I can still remember how scary that was. But anyway, I will tell you the good news. Having spent those 2 nights in jail in 2 different countries, I never went that route again in the rest of my life.
Well, so that was the end of your jail.
That was the end of my jail terms. Yeah.
Jail days. Now, when you after you got out of high school in Nuremberg, the military, I would assume they still have it, but the University of Maryland had campuses or had classes throughout the military bases. This is when you entered college?
Yes, but the school I went to only had a couple hundred students. They were either military dependents or diplomatic people. For example, my roommate his father was a diplomat in Moscow. And it was a fascinating school because everybody there was from around the world. But one of the most fascinating people was Tolstoy's sister. She taught Russian language. Unfortunately, I never had a chance to take that course, but she was a little squatty gal, and it was very fascinating to meet her. It was a wonderful school to go to, and when I finished there, we came back to the United States. My dad happened to be stationed in Fort Meade, and so I was able to continue and finish the University of Maryland, which I did.
Now, at what part had your dad already participated in the atomic bomb tests?
He did that in about 52.
Okay,
so we're now in about 1958.
Okay, all right. What you graduated from the University of Maryland?
Yes.
What was your degree in?
I was in education. I taught school for a couple of years.
Where did you teach?
In Baltimore City.
Baltimore's an interesting city.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah, home of Edgar Allan Poe and Babe Ruth.
Yep.
Yeah. What did you work for the ag department? Where was this?
Well, when I was at the University of Maryland, as I mentioned, we never seemed to have any money, being 5 boys. I had to work my way through school, so I got a job at the agriculture department at the University of Maryland, and I had that job for the years that I attended there. And what we did there, we built exhibits that were shown in, each county has its own county fair. And we built a University of Maryland agriculture exhibit for these various county fairs. So that was fascinating because I went to every county in the state of Maryland for those years. So we did that round robin every year. So that was kind of neat.
What you taught school in the Ghetto?
Yes,
Baltimore. Tell me about that.
Well, that was I was certified for industrial education and physics. I taught industrial education, so I taught basically shop classes. But and that was quite good because many of the students really couldn't read very well, and we would teach them how to read a ruler, how to measure. They had to read to build things, so that was really, really good from that standpoint. And I took great pride in, and I felt in moving students along, and I have always enjoyed being a teacher. I've been a teacher for many years, off and on.
Now, you went to law school.
That's correct. I went and got a Juris Doctorate in law from the University of Baltimore.
How did you work your way through law school?
Well, I did that by selling law books. And so I got a job selling law books.
Who do you sell law books to?
Lawyers, accountants, people like that.
I mean,
and I worked for a company called Commerce Clearinghouse. But while doing that job, I attended law school and got my law degree.
That isn't your ordinary door-to-door salesman type
No.
product.
No, and I never went to law school to become a lawyer. I went to enhance my business career, my business opportunities, which definitely was a help throughout my career.
Now, you went into business right after that?
After I finished selling law books, from there, with a cousin-in-law of mine, we developed a business called Edward Parish. And what we did, we took companies public, raised private funding. You may recall a guy by the name of Johnny Unitas, who was a football player.
Yeah.
He had the Johnny Unitas quarterback clubs, restaurants, kind of like a McDonald's. And we funded that, and I got to meet him several times. That was kind of neat. His hands were about this big. I swear, he had the biggest hands I've ever met in my life.
You moved the business on to Chicago?
Well, after our business didn't do so well, Edward Parish, I got a company I went to Boston and worked for a company called Autex, Automated Exchange. A guy by the name of Alan Kay came up with this concept, but it happened, he made a lot of money and had a large block of stock, and he went to sell it, and he couldn't figure out how to get it sold easily and quickly. What he developed was an automated exchange on the computer. Now, this isn't
K-Pro, is it?
Pardon?
Did he become this? He built the K-Pro product down in Solana Beach. Is this the same?
I don't believe so. No,
okay, different K.
But what he did was, this is about 1970. He set up a system where I would go and call on major funding sources like Fidelity, T. Rowe Price in Baltimore. And then we would tie them in to the trading desks like Salomon Brothers, Goldman Sachs, that kind of thing. So I had a very unique job where I was walking I was bonded at the time for millions of dollars because of the confidential information I was aware of. And what we did, they moved me to Chicago to open up the branch there. We were very successful. Eventually, that company was bought out by Xerox Corporation. Mm-hmm. And I went on to something else.
I was going to say you've had a number of business opportunities in your life, and in and out of teaching.
Yes. And I over the years, I've always been had sales groups, salesmen working under me, and doing that teaching. And of course, I taught at the beginning of my career, and then, as you know, I currently teach at the community college level now.
Did you get into mortgage banking, or was it?
Well, I kind of backed into it. I've been in financing since about 1970 of one kind or another. Did some large funding projects. For example, when I was with Prudential, I was one of their finance people. We did the largest deal we did was $225 million deal for Cleveland Electric, and that was for nuclear fuel. Interesting thing, you can lease the nuclear fuel, but you can't have a license to own it. But some of the other things I've done is with U-Haul Corporation, we developed a $75 million line for a number of their trucks, and we did the largest Toyota transaction in their history. At that time, I was working for Toyota.
You created? What is Empire Associates?
Yes, that's a company we own now. That's a mortgage brokering company, and what we do is provide loans for 1 to 4 units primarily, although we can do commercial loans, and we concentrate primarily with seniors and manufactured homes. And there's quite a market for that. And
tell me what the housing debacle that we've had over the past few years, how's that affected your business?
Dramatically, in a negative sort of way, because for every $100 I may have made, say 3 or 4 years ago, I now make probably 25 cents. I mean, $25. A fourth what I used to make, roughly.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's typical of the whole industry. And my biggest issue is that I think today we find ourselves overregulated. I'll give you a small example. If you're doing a loan with me, just to have what we call the loan request documentation that we send into the lender, and when you're buying a regular house, that used to be maybe 5 to 10 pages. It's now 54 pages. That hasn't got you the loan yet, and that hasn't completed the transaction. Today, an average house deal will take you about 200 pieces of paper.
So even though the prices of homes per se have gone down dramatically, it still isn't really a buyer's market.
Well, it is if you have good credit, you have the down payment, and you don't have a history of an REO behind you or short sale and things of that nature. So if you've been fairly squeaky clean, so to speak, you have no trouble getting a good
In other
mortgage.
words, if you have the money, you can buy anything.
That's absolutely right. And and then under the new Dodd-Frank bill that just came down the pike, we mortgage brokers can only make about 40% of what we used to make because of something called broker compensation and the percentages and how it's calculated. I won't get into that because it gets a little bit complicated, but all the rules and regulations have squeezed the whole market.
Now, you live in Laguna Vista, down here
That's
in
correct.
Oceanside, and
It's a nice community for seniors, and
well, you also have lived in the Palm Springs area.
that's correct. We still do. We still have a place there. And we live there. We live in the manufactured home there. We have one, which is interesting. We had it in a park on the ocean here in Oceanside, and it wasn't financially. It was kind of prohibitive to stay in that park, so we simply moved the whole coach to another park in Palm Springs.
Well, for senior citizens, manufactured housing is an alternative to living in the rent.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very, very practical way. If you go out and you buy a home, it costs $200,000 or $300,000. You have a mortgage, and if you live there, that's fine. But most seniors don't have a $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000 a month income. Most of them have incomes anywhere from $1,400 to $3,000 a month. So you have to live where you can afford it. Now, how can you beat living in a manufactured home that has 1,400 square feet in it, and all you're paying is, say, $500 or $600 in space rent in a community with a pool and rec room and all the other things that go with it? And the safety of being with other seniors. It's a great way to live.
Tell me about your teaching experience now. You're teaching at what college?
I teach at San Jacinto College. It's a two-year college. Yeah, it's a community college. I teach on the Menifee and the Temecula campuses, and I teach such courses as the law class, the economics class, mortgage brokering, primarily to people in the age bracket of late 20s to early 50s. And it's amazing how many people are out there trying to re-engineer their career paths in this economy.
Well, I taught for 5 years at Maricosta, and the thing that frustrated me is the number of people who supposedly had at least a high school education that come in. They couldn't conjugate verbs, they couldn't spell, and hardly any of them could type. Have you found any of those problems?
Well, not really, Tom, because I suspect you taught the age bracket coming right out of high school into the community college.
There were a lot of adults.
Well, okay.
It's amazing on how many adults didn't have those, abilities.
I can tell you that I really have not had that experience so much, unless they're younger. If they're 25 years old, yes, and I have occasionally get a young student, not very often. But I'm appalled at how poorly the English skills are for young people, say between age 20 and 26. They really do not know how to structure sentences. They don't know how to write right. And more importantly, they don't know how to put their thoughts into writing and to communicate them. And I completely agree with that.
Well, it's interesting it would be interesting to know how many people would be running to the map when you've mentioned places like Brussels and Nancy and Manchester. How many of them would run to the map to see where those places were, or if they could even find them? Because geography and to a great extent history is really not being taught in the schools, even in the grade or the high schools.
Well, that's really tragic, because when I was being raised, I had to learn where every state in the country was, every president, beginning with Washington. I've actually met a couple of presidents. I saw Harry Truman one time. I met President Ford, Johnson, when he was the vice president. But young people don't get those experiences, and they don't seem to want them. It's kind of a shame.
Well, so there was a report the other day. Somebody was saying that there was a lot of school kids today that don't know who George Washington was.
I heard that statistic that 75% of high school students did not know who George Washington was. I think you were telling me a little story about a coin with Eisenhower's picture on it, and a young man had a little difficulty quite relating it until he was prodded along.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a shame.
Well, it was my grandson. He didn't know who Eisenhower was.
Well, I didn't want to say that here on the television, but you...
So I gave him the coin, by the way.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's next for Ed Parish?
I don't know. I decided retirement's out of the question. I tried that 10 years ago, and that didn't work. My grandfather worked till he was 85, and I suppose I'll just follow that path.
Have you? You know, it's been my experience, and I'm wondering if it's the same as you. If you keep busy and you're doing something that you love, it does extend your life a little bit.
Well, you don't have time to not let it. You have to have it extended to get everything done.
Uh-huh.
And you yourself keep yourself very active. But we're at the age, Tom, we both know people that if they're not busy, they don't seem to last very long.
Yeah, it's you get stagnant.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, Ed, it's been fun talking with you, and you've had a very interesting life. I'll have to talk with you more extensively about those nights in jail. What did Dad say about that, or did he know that you had spent?
To this day, I don't think I ever told him that I spent time in jail, because my father was a very rigid military man, and I don't think he was be very forgiving that I wound up doing that. So,
did Mom ever know it?
I don't think I ever told anybody. It was years before I ever really mentioned that to anyone.
Did you ever get the Lincoln fixed?
Oh yeah, we got the Lincoln fixed, and ultimately that wound up getting sold to a GI before we came back here to the United States.
Yeah, would you love to have that car today?
Yeah, I sure would.
It'd be worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Was it 49?
49.
Yeah. We've been talking with Ed Parish of Oceanside, and this is Living Legacies. Join me again here next time on Living Legacies.